Before I start this second part, I just want to say I wrote out this list of ships months ago. So if some ships have gained popularity since then, or aren't on this list, or if the numbers are off, that's why. This is a poly ship that I thought would be by far the most popular in its division, as it combines two of the most popular ships, Bumblebee and White Rose. Pollination is the pairing of Weiss, Yang, Rwby, and Blake, and sits at 195 works on AO3, barely missing the cutoff for Tier 2. It gets its name from the fact that the characters have specific flowers associated with them, and pollination is the act of procreation amongst flowers. This ship comes from people wanting to see Team Rwby as one big happy lesbian family. I personally don't mind this ship as it involves a few ships I like, Freezerburn, Monochrome, and Ladybug, and so long as it doesn't involve Enabler as an active thing, it's a cute ship. This one's a bit of a controversial one to talk about. Toradana, awful name by the way, is the pairing between Adam and Blake, and was a canonical relationship that happened pre-Volume 1, and ended on bad terms, with Adam becoming emotionally abusive towards the end of the relationship, and obsessive afterwards, which eventually led to his death. This ship sits at 187 on AO3 and is usually tied to an AU where Adam either A, never becomes the person we see in Rwby, or B, an Adam redemption story, neither of which I'm really a fan of. The in-canon actions of Adam make this a hard ship to like, even in the context of an AU, where things are different. But what this ship really shows us is the mixed feelings on the road the show decided to take with Adam, which I can understand. I think they dropped the ball on Adam as well, but most likely not in the same way most people think they did. But that's a video for another day. I think this ship would be better called Beauty and the Beast, with Blake's love of books and Adam having the lone rose for a symbol. The idea behind this ship is an interesting one. A morally wrong character falling in love with the morally pure character, and becoming a better person through that love. Unfortunately for Roswick, the ship between Rwby and Torchwick, the age gap between them is way too vast, with Rwby being 15 at the start of the show, and Torchwick being about 32, I think. This ship sits at a kinda gross 179 on fanfiction.net, though I guess to be fair to the shippers of Roswick, Torchwick didn't have a canonical age before this year. As stated earlier, my only real problem is the same problem Gelato has. There's just too big of an age difference. Another ship with a bad name, Mercury, is the pairing between Emerald and Mercury. It sits at 166 works on AO3, and while not as close as Gelato, it has the same vibes, with Emerald and Mercury being partners in crime in the earlier seasons. Hell, in Volume 9, I believe Mercury even puts himself between her and Tyrion to protect her. In the most recent volume, they have grown apart, with Mercury either just standing around doing nothing, or teaming up with somebody else. Who knows, maybe it will be Emerald that gets Mercury to switch sides. If not, I could see him being the second member of Salem's group to die. If I had to give this ship a better name, I think I would go with Winged Thieves, because he's based on Mercury, who has winged shoes, and she's based on Aladdin, who is a thief. Now we have a ship that was spawned in the early days of Rwby, when there weren't that many characters. Comet Boots is the pairing of Mercury and Yang. The primary reason for people shipping this, I'm pretty sure, is their opposing fighting styles, with Yang focusing on punching and Mercury on kicking, and the fact they were always shown squaring off in the openings, which in the shipping community of Rwby is plenty of reason. This ship sits at an impressive, for what it is, 160 works on AO3, and gets its name from the fact they are both fighters, and Mercury's symbol is boot, maybe? Actually, I'm not sure why that's the name. Martial Arcs is the pairing between teammates John and Ren. At 160 works on AO3, it is the third most popular ship within the Juniper team, and gets its name from the fact that Ren is a martial artist, and John's last name is Arc, thus Martial Arcs. Yet another ship I have absolutely no feeling towards, that seems to only exist to bolster the amount of yaoi ships in the fandom. Another ship that started in the early days of Rwby, Iceberg is the pairing of Weiss and Neptune. It gets its name from Weiss's ice element and Neptune's water-tide inspirations, being named after the Roman god of the sea. The ship sits at 158 works on AO3, and got its start with Neptune's introduction in Volume 2, where throughout the volume it is pretty obvious they both have feelings for each other. Though these feelings die in the very next volume, where it turns out Neptune is just a massive flirt, putting an end, for the most part, to this ship. It also doesn't help that Neptune disappeared from our screens after Volume 3. Nora's Ark is the ship between Jean and Nora, whose name is a play on words with Noah's Ark. It sits at 158 works on AO3 and is mostly used in stories that contain a Jean harem or smut. Baked Alaska is a pairing of Yang and Neo that gets its name from a type of ice cream that you bake in a very hot oven briefly, which kind of fits with the why people ship them. Most people's reasoning for this ship comes from their very brief fight. They seem to think that Yang was the first person to challenge Neo in a fight, so Neo respects her. You know, the completely one-sided fight that Neo won in like 2 minutes, which funnily enough is actually shorter than the time it takes to cook a baked Alaska, which is about 4 minutes. If you couldn't guess, I'm not a huge fan of this ship because the reasoning behind it isn't even based in fact. More Than Their Name would have been a better name for this ship, though admittedly longer than the name Schnikos, the ship between Weiss and Pyrrha. That just matches their last names together. I can't say why other people might ship this, but for me personally it comes down to the fact that both Weiss and Neo know what it's like to be judged by their name rather than who they are. So that kinship could be the start of their relationship. This ship stands at 151 works on AO3. The Let's Ship the Older Sisters Together ship is basically how this ship got its name. Elder Burn is the pairing between Winter and Yang. It is shipped presumably for the same reason that Weiss and Yang are shipped, beauty in contrast, with Winter being a more severe and serious Weiss, having grown up entirely in Atlas, without influences such as Rwby, like Weiss had. Elderburn sits at 148 works on AO3, and is an okay ship if you can get past the 5 to 8 year age difference, and the fact that it is one of your best friend's sisters. Another one for the indifference pile. This one is pretty screwed up. Nightfall is the ship between Jean and Cinder, that gets its name from Cinder's last name and Jean's night aesthetic. Or maybe its name is from the fact that this ship can only happen if Jean turns to the dark side, falling in a sense, like an angel. This ship is super fucked up. I don't know who decided that they should ship Jean with a woman who murdered his teammate, but they clearly have some problems. It sits at 144 works on AO3, most of which I'm assuming are either smut or involve an evil Jean. I wonder what ship is up next. Oh, Jesus Christ. Two messed up ships back to back, eh? Falling Petals is a pairing of Rwby and Cinder that gets its name from Cinder's name and the fact that Rwby makes petals, also maybe from the fact that the only way this could happen is if Rwby has a massive fall from grace and became evil. This ship is even worse, considering the events of Volume 8. Fallen Petals sits at 142 works on AO3 and further proves that people will ship anything, a fact that our next ship further cements. Silent Night is the ship between Neo and Jean, and much like a lot of Jean's ships, gets its name from his night aesthetic, and Neo's muteness. Silent Night is a new ship that has grown fairly rapidly, with the reason being their mutual absolute hatred for Cinder, and their want for revenge, which, while interesting, isn't a healthy basis for a relationship. You know, I'm starting to see a pattern with my thoughts on Neo ships. Silent Night stands at 139 works on AO3. Now we have a ship involving our first canonically lesbian character. Chameleon is the ship of Blake and Ilya, that gets its name from their animal attributes, with Yang being a cat and Ilya being a chameleon. This ship comes from Ilya's canonical crush on Blake, though unfortunately within canon it is a one-sided crush, which sucks honestly. I would have loved to see this ship happen. Catmillion sits at 131 works on AO3. Yet it spelt rose in the middle, like a rose, instead of the usual ROZ. It took me way too long to figure that out. Frozen Steel is a poly ship involving Weiss, Rwby, and Penny. With a name that took me a long time to figure out, it sits at 119, works on AO3. I only just learned that this ship was a thing while writing this Iceberg. But, I'm kind of already in love with it. The Rwby and Penny ship is one of the cutest ships in the show, as Weiss, and it's perfection. Being in a relationship with both these lovable idiots would give Weiss all the hugs she never got as a child. Which, if there's anybody who deserves lots of hugs, it's Weiss. Strawberry Shortcake is the ship between Rwby and Neo, which is yet another one of those enemies to lover ships that are so popular. With 124 works on AO3, this ship is one on the rise, with a majority of the stories being written in the last few years. My assumption on why this ship seems to be on the rise is the role that Rwby plays in the death of Torchwood, and how that can play into Neo's redemption and overall character development. For Neo to fully redeem herself, she needs to let go of the misplaced anger she holds for Rwby, and who better to help with that than the person she hates? The person that was there for Torchwick's last moments. This ship gets its name from Ruby's love of strawberries, and Neo's name being an allusion to dessert. Electromagnetism, the ship between Nora and Pyrrha, that sits at a shocking 103 works on AO3. This ship gets its name from the character's semblances, with Nora having the ability to absorb electricity and turn it into energy, and with Pyrrha having the ability to control magnetism. I don't really know why people would ship these two outside of maybe a polyamorous relationship between Team Juniper. Oh wait, it's mostly smut? Yeah, that checks out too. Bloodmint, the ship between Emerald and Rwby, a ship that gets its actually relatively cool name from Ruby's crimson red color and Emerald's mint green aesthetic. This ship has a similar reason behind it as Strawberry Shortcake, just to a lesser degree, with fans thinking that Rwby could be the one to help her see the light. I guess it's used to think, with Oscar actually being the one that managed to give Emerald that final push to the good side. The enemy of my enemy is my friend is the only explanation I can think of that would make sense for this ship, with both these individuals having some massive beef with our favorite dorky protagonist. Spice Cream is the ship between Neo and Cinder, that sits at 88 works on AO3. It's a ship that as of Volume 8 is dead in the water with Cinder's betrayal of Neo. Not that it was a ship that ever had much of a chance, given that after Ruby's death, Neo would have likely turned her attention towards killing Cinder, likely in her sleep. After all, there is no way Neo just lets go of her anger towards Cinder for her part in Torchwick's death. It's more just biding her time until she can figure out a way to get it done. Iron Witch is the ship between Glinda and Ironwood that sits at 83 works on AO3. This ship is one of the early season ships that was really only around because these two characters didn't really interact with anybody else, and they're both part of Ozpin's Inner Circle. This ship has been dead canon-wise since Volume 3, with Good Witch disappearing from the show, and Ironwood shifting to becoming the antagonist of Volume 7 and 8, and possibly being dead. It still sits as one of the most popular ships for Good Witch fans, who apparently actually exist. Snowfall is the ship between Winter and Cinder, which gets its name from combining the fact that Schnee means snow in German and Cinder's last name being Fall. This ship usually can be found either in AUs where Cinder never joined Salem and will end up a completely different person, to she is in canon, or in redemption stories, where they skip the actual story of how Cinder redeemed herself, which I can only assume they do because there really is no reasonable way for her to redeem herself at this point in time. Renoark is a poly ship between the remaining members of Team Juniper, Ren, Nora, and Jean, that sits at 70 works on AO3. It really doesn't have a fancy name like most of the other ships, so like previous ones that have a boring name, let's give it a new one. What about gender bent? Because they're all gender bent versions of historical or mythological figures. I don't really know why people ship this. Maybe they just want Jean to have people to love after the loss of Pyrrha. Nuts and Bolts, the ship between Tyrion and Watts, that sits at 68 works on AO3, which isn't that bad for two characters that only appear actively in 2 seasons each, one of them dying in one of them. This ship is like the evil twin of Nuts and Bolts. While Nuts and Bolts is the symbol of pureness in ships, Nuts and Bolts is the symbol of sadism, with it involving two of the evilest characters in the show, with its name coming from Watts' penchant for electrical devices, and the fact that Tyrion is batshit crazy. Buff Woman Hot. That has to be the thought process for anybody who would ship these two characters, because there really isn't any logical reason for Pink Lemonade to exist. Pink Lemonade being the ship between Nora and Yang, that stands at a surprising 57 IO3, though most of it is explicit content, which I guess supports my theory of Buff Woman Hot being the reason for anybody shipping this. Fandom, are you alright? Do we need to talk? Is everything okay at home? Because this is the case that maybe everything isn't alright. Achilles' Heel is the ship between Pyrrha and her murderer, Cinder, that gets its admittedly morbidly funny name from the ties between the way she dies and the way Achilles does, the mythological figure she is based on, which is being shot in the Achilles tendon. Well, technically it's more like what leads to the deaths of both of them, not actually what kills them. This ship sits at 56 stories in AO3, and mostly consists of evil Pyrrha stories. This is another ship with a name that took me way too long to get. This is another ship with a name that took me way too long to get the joke or reasoning behind. Too long as in I just figured it out as I was writing this section of the script, which I am writing months after setting this iceberg up. Pennywise is the ship between Weiss and Penny. Its name a reference to the clown alien from Stephen King's It, whose name is Pennywise. This ship sits at 52 stories on AO3 and is mostly featured in the poly ship of Frozen Steel. And that was part 2 of my Rwby ship Iceberg. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment, subscribe, and please remember that this is just my opinion on these ships. So if you disagree with them, that's fine. I'm not trying to attack anybody for their ship choices. So, once again, thanks for watching, Ouija out. And that was part 2 of my Rwby ship Iceberg. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And please remember that this video is just for fun, and this is just my opinions on these ships. So if you disagree, that's fine. I'm not trying to attack anybody for their ship choices. So once again, thanks for watching, Ouija out.